Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful today.
Following a disastrous wedding day, Taylor says these 8 words to Ridge. In the upcoming episodes, Taylor Hayes will experience a range of emotions. It's clear that Taylor has some insecurities about her connection with Ridge Forrester, but she will try her hardest to move over them. Ridge will fulfill Taylor's wedding request and consent to remarrying her once she proposes. Taylor will be ecstatic about that and will attempt to persuade herself that Ridge is committing to her for the rest of her life. Naturally, Taylor ought to be aware by now of Ridge's poor performance history. Ridge's promise is essentially meaningless because he has vacillated so much over the years. Ridge still secretly desires Brooke Logan, and maybe always will. Taylor will not emerge victorious from this love triangle, regardless of the ring that she wears. B&B is acting as though Ridge deserves all of this attention, even though he isn't a treasure worth fighting for anyway. But eventually, Taylor will realize that getting back together with Ridge was a mistake. Ridge is about to make a revelation that might confirm Brooke was correct about his true emotions. The truth will surface as soon as Brooke and Ridge argue about his engagement news. Ridge seems to acknowledge that his decision to remain with Taylor may have been motivated by guilt and a desire to save her further suffering. Given Taylor's history of broken heart syndrome, Ridge doesn't want to ruin her anymore after causing her more than enough grief. Because of this, Ridge might go with this wedding, but it doesn't appear like he and Taylor will get married. If he decides against lying to Taylor, Ridge may abandon her at the altar. Alternatively, she may come to terms with Brooke's reality and abandon him. In any case, it appears that the wedding is about to end badly. This leads us to Taylor's final 8 words to Ridge: "You've broken my heart for the last time." Will Taylor make the decision that enough is enough at last? Will Taylor ever again allow herself to think that Ridge might be her future? According to teasers for The Bold and the Beautiful, Taylor could need to change her viewpoint on genuine love, so keep an eye out. Taylor Hayes had always believed in second chances, especially when it came to love. Over the years, she had weathered storm after storm with Ridge Forrester, endless cycles of passion, betrayal, reconciliation, and heartbreak that defined their tumultuous relationship. Every time Ridge drifted back into her life, Taylor felt the familiar pull of nostalgia and hope, as if maybe this time, things would be different. Maybe this time, he would finally choose her completely. And so, when Ridge accepted her marriage proposal and promised to marry her once again, she let herself believe. She dared to dream of a future where she was no longer the second choice, no longer the fallback when things didn't work out with Brooke Logan. Taylor had envisioned a new beginning for them, one founded on maturity, understanding, and love. She convinced herself that Ridge's acceptance of her proposal wasn't born from guilt or obligation, but from a genuine desire to start fresh. She had told herself that all the years of heartbreak had led to this redemption, that Ridge had finally seen her worth. But deep down, a part of her remained cautious, haunted by the memories of every time Ridge had chosen Brooke over her. She tried to quiet those doubts, to silence the inner voice that warned her of history repeating itself, but the fears lingered. On the morning of their wedding, Taylor stood in front of the mirror, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. She looked radiant, dressed in a gown that symbolized hope and renewal. Her children, especially Steffi, had supported her decision, wanting to believe that Ridge had turned over a new leaf. The ceremony was set to be intimate yet elegant, a celebration of enduring love and second chances. As she stood there preparing to walk down the aisle, Taylor let herself smile, believing that she was finally going to be Ridge's forever. But behind the scenes, reality was beginning to crack through the surface. Ridge was wrestling with a storm of emotions. His heart was divided, his mind torn between duty and desire, love and guilt. Brooke, as always, was the unspoken presence hovering in the shadows of their reunion. Ridge had recently argued with Brooke about the engagement, and in that confrontation, buried feelings resurfaced. Brooke had insisted that Ridge was making a mistake, that he wasn't being honest with himself or with Taylor. And maybe, just maybe, Ridge had begun to believe she was right. As the ceremony drew near, Ridge felt the weight of the truth pressing on his chest. He didn't want to hurt Taylor, he had already caused her so much pain in the past. She had always been the one to pick up the pieces, to forgive, to carry the burden of his indecision. And now, here he was again, standing on the precipice of another disaster, another choice that would shatter her. He remembered her struggles with heartbreak, the genuine health crisis she endured due to emotional trauma, and he was terrified of pushing her over the edge once more. So he stood there, paralyzed by guilt, unable to move forward but afraid to retreat. The minutes ticked by, the guests waited, and Taylor began to sense that something was wrong. When she finally saw Ridge, their eyes met, and in that instant, she knew. She saw it in his face, the conflict, the regret, the sorrow. This wasn't a man ready to marry her, this was a man about to break her heart again. What followed was not a wedding, but a reckoning. Whether Ridge stopped the ceremony himself or Taylor confronted him before it could begin, the result was the same: devastation. The guests began to murmur, sensing the tension in the air. Steffi looked on with rising concern. And Taylor, ever the composed and graceful woman, felt her heart implode silently within her chest. There were no hysterics, no public breakdowns. Instead, she stood there, rooted in place, as the weight of years of disappointment came crashing down in one terrible moment. And then, with tears in her eyes and a voice that trembled with betrayal and resolve, she spoke the 8 words that would define the end of an era: "You've broken my heart for the last time." Those words were more than a declaration, they were a release. A liberation from the cycle that had held her captive for so long. She wasn't just addressing Ridge in that moment, she was speaking to every version of herself that had waited, hoped, compromised, and sacrificed for a man who could never love her the way she deserved. She was speaking to the young woman who fell for Ridge all those years ago, to the mother who had raised his children alone, to the psychiatrist who had analyzed his actions over and over, trying to make sense of his ambivalence. She was speaking to the woman who had always come in second to Brooke Logan, the perennial other woman in Ridge's heart. And in those 8 words, she reclaimed her dignity. Ridge, for his part, was stunned into silence. Perhaps he hadn't realized until that moment just how deeply he had wounded her. Maybe he thought she would understand, that she would forgive him once again, that history would repeat itself. But this time, Taylor was done. As she turned away from him, each step down the aisle was a step toward healing. The guests parted silently, watching as the bride who never got her wedding walked out of the ceremony with her head held high. There were no vows exchanged, no rings traded, no kiss to seal a new beginning. Only the haunting echo of a love that had died long before it was laid to rest. In the days that followed, Taylor struggled to pick up the pieces. The media buzzed with the scandal, the Forresters tried to console her, and Steffi became her fiercest defender. But Taylor didn't want pity. She wanted clarity. She wanted peace. And for the first time in a long time, she began to find it, not in Ridge's arms, but in her own strength. She looked back on her history with Ridge and saw it with new eyes. The highs had been euphoric, yes, but the lows had been catastrophic. Every time she opened her heart to him, it ended in heartbreak. She began to wonder if Ridge ever truly loved her, or if she had always been the safe choice, the woman he turned to when things went south with Brooke. And as painful as that realization was, it was also freeing. Because now, she could stop chasing a fantasy. She could stop competing in a triangle where the outcome had always been rigged. She could stop hoping that one day, Ridge would be the man she needed him to be. He wasn't. And he never would be. In therapy sessions with her own colleagues and friends, Taylor unpacked her emotions. She realized that her need for Ridge's love had become a reflection of deeper insecurities, a desire to prove her worth through his approval. She confronted the truth that she had sacrificed her own happiness countless times for a man who was incapable of choosing her fully. And she began to forgive herself, for believing, for hoping, for staying. Because it wasn't weakness that kept her tethered to Ridge all those years, it was love. Misguided, perhaps, but love nonetheless. Now, she was ready to redirect that love inward. To rebuild her life on her own terms. To find happiness not in someone else's promises, but in her own sense of self-worth. Ridge, meanwhile, had to face the consequences of his choices. He returned to Brooke, of course, he always did. But something had shifted. The people around him, including his children, began to see him not as the romantic hero of a decades-long saga, but as a man who had failed to honor the hearts of two incredible women. His charm had lost its sheen. His indecision had finally caught up to him. And though he and Brooke may have resumed their dysfunctional dance, the magic was gone. Because for the first time, Taylor wasn't in the wings, waiting for her turn. She was gone. And Ridge knew he had lost her, truly and completely. In the months that followed, Taylor embraced new beginnings. She returned to her practice with renewed passion, helping others find clarity even as she found her own. She traveled, explored interests that had long been neglected, and allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't tethered to the Forrester name. She reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and even began to consider the possibility of love again, real love, with someone who saw her not as a second choice, but as the only choice. Her children watched her transformation with pride. Steffi in particular was deeply moved by her mother's strength. And as Taylor stood on her own 2 feet, she became a symbol of resilience for women everywhere who had been caught in toxic love triangles, who had given too much and received too little. "You've broken my heart for the last time," she had said, and she meant it. It was the end of a painful chapter, but also the beginning of a beautiful new one. A chapter where Taylor Hayes was no longer defined by her relationship with Ridge Forrester, but by her own courage, compassion, and conviction. The bold and the beautiful had often painted her as the wounded lover, the rival to Brooke, the woman always on the verge of heartbreak. But now, she was something else entirely, empowered, enlightened, and free. And for the first time in a long time, Taylor didn't need a wedding to feel whole. She had herself. And that was more than enough. Finn is thrilled when Luna reveals plans to ensure that Steffi is never a problem again, while Brooke is shocked by Ridge's engagement. Baker forced Will to wear a wire while he imprisoned Luna, and Ridge consents to marry Taylor. Nick keeps listening in on Taylor and Ridge's conversation about how happy they make each other at Il Giardino. To their engagement, they exchange kisses. According to Taylor, she is a modern lady pursuing her goals, which include him. They continue kissing. Ridge and Taylor are excited to be engaged and return to Eric's house. She acknowledges that she didn't get his dad's approval and worries about his reaction to their news. He tells her that his father only wants them to be happy and loves her. She assures him that their children would be ecstatic for them and that this is their moment. He makes fun of her telling their grandchildren that he proposed at a subpar Italian restaurant. Phoebe must be grinning down at them, she is certain. She has recovered thanks to him, and they have a promising future. Brooke expresses to Hope her happiness about returning to Forrester. She will discuss bringing her line back to life with Ridge. Hope is certain that her mother is still interested in rekindling her romance with Ridge. Before Hope interrupts, Brooke reflects on her most recent rendezvous with Ridge in Italy. Hope tells her mother that she is more deserving than Ridge. According to Brooke, Nick said the same thing to her. Hope inquires as to why and for how long you will be returning. According to Brooke, he doesn't spend much time on land. Her daughter believes he has returned to get back in touch with her. Brooke acknowledges that it seems like they haven't spent any time together. He made her laugh a lot and gave her a sense of specialness and love. However, as Ridge is her fate, her heart remains with him. Hope leaps into Nick's arms as he enters. She hopes he will stay to provide for her mother. Nick clarifies that he won't be departing as quickly as he had anticipated due to a recent development. Hope lets them handle things on their own. Brooke is informed by Nick that her daughter is amazing. What has changed to keep him in Los Angeles longer, wonders Brooke. She encourages him to come out with it even if she assumes it is horrible. According to Nick, he spotted Ridge and Taylor, and she asked him to marry her. Brooke is taken aback. Ridge agreed, Nick adds. The day had begun like any other in Los Angeles, the sun casting a warm golden glow over the sprawling Forrester estate, but for Brooke Logan, nothing could have prepared her for the tidal wave of emotion that was about to crash into her life. Her entire world shifted in a heartbeat when Nick revealed the bombshell. Ridge, the man she had loved endlessly, the one she considered her destiny, had accepted Taylor's proposal. The words hung heavy in the air, slicing through the fragile hope she'd clung to like glass. Her breath caught, her body froze, and her heart seemed to stop beating for a fraction of a second. "He said yes?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nick nodded solemnly. She could feel the floor beneath her slipping away as memories of her and Ridge flooded her mind, the kisses under the stars, the laughter in Tuscany, the promises whispered during stolen moments. And now, Taylor had stolen it all. Again. Back at Il Giardino, the scene was much different. Ridge and Taylor laughed like young lovers in the honeymoon phase of a rekindled romance. The way they looked at each other was electric, almost naive, as if the past had been wiped clean, as if Brooke had never existed between them. Taylor, emboldened by the ring on her finger and Ridge's kiss still lingering on her lips, felt triumphant. She told Ridge she was a modern woman, a mother, a survivor, and now, a fiancée. She had gone after what she wanted, and got it. They kissed again, and the world seemed to fall away around them. They didn't notice the discreet figure of Nick peering over his shoulder, concealed behind a row of decorative palms. He wasn't spying out of malice but necessity. He needed to protect Brooke, to be her eyes when her heart couldn't see the truth. At Eric's mansion, Ridge and Taylor were giddy like teenagers sneaking home after their first date. She confessed she hadn't asked Eric's permission, something Ridge found both amusing and exhilarating. "Dad loves you," he assured her. "He'll be thrilled." She smiled and whispered, "This is our time, Ridge." Finally. As she spoke, she looked up at the heavens, her heart aching with love and longing. "Phoebe's smiling down on us. I feel her." Ridge took her hands in his. "She'd be proud," he whispered. In that moment, they weren't just two lovers starting anew, they were two parents healing old wounds, sewing together the tattered fabric of a once fractured family. Their future sparkled with promise, and nothing, or no one, seemed to threaten that glow. But miles across town, threats were indeed brewing, and they were far more dangerous than they appeared. At Forrester Creations, Hope was thrilled to be back in the swing of things. She chatted with her mother, not yet realizing the heartbreak that was bubbling under Brooke's surface. "You still want him, don't you?" Hope asked softly, sensing her mother's distracted glances and silent sighs. Brooke gave a vague smile, torn between present reality and wistful memory. She confessed that Nick made her feel seen, heard, and genuinely loved, something Ridge hadn't done in a long while. "But he's still your destiny, isn't he?" Hope pressed. Brooke nodded slowly, the war between heart and logic raging silently in her chest. But the universe had other plans. Nick's arrival brought warmth and laughter, for a brief moment. Hope ran into his arms like a little girl greeting a favorite uncle. He smiled and complimented her growth, her strength, and the light she brought to Brooke's life. But when Hope left the room, that light dimmed as Nick revealed what he had witnessed. "Ridge and Taylor, they're engaged," he said. Brooke's world, so carefully reconstructed since her last heartbreak, collapsed again. Her breath faltered, and her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "He said yes," she repeated, the words foreign on her tongue. "He actually said yes." As if Brooke's pain wasn't enough, another drama unfolded with far darker undertones. In a coordinated sting operation, Detective Baker had finally convinced young Will Spencer, naive but determined, to wear a wire in an effort to trap Luna. The truth had been gnawing at Baker for months. Luna wasn't the sweet, misunderstood designer everyone believed her to be. She was hiding something dark and dangerous. Baker had his suspicions, but suspicions weren't enough. He needed hard evidence. So he turned to Will, who had once trusted Luna implicitly. Wearing the wire, Will approached her at a cozy cafe in West Hollywood, pretending to want to rekindle their past friendship. Luna, blindsided by the charm and vulnerability in his voice, let her guard down. "Steffi's always in the way," she murmured, her voice low and laced with venom. "But don't worry, soon enough, she won't be a problem ever again." The tape was damning. Back at the Cliff House, Finn was unsuspectingly pleased when Luna visited him under the pretense of discussing Steffi's latest press campaign. But her mood was uncharacteristically elated, even smug. "I've got a plan," she said, twirling a strand of her glossy hair. "And once it's in motion, Steffi will never be a problem again. For anyone." Finn, confused but intrigued, raised a brow. "What are you talking about?" Luna smiled, but there was a darkness in her eyes. "Just trust me, Finn. You'll finally have the peaceful life you've always wanted. No drama. No battles. Just us." Finn's chest tightened. The words were supposed to bring relief, but they brought dread. He remembered how Steffi had warned him not to trust Luna, how she'd said something wasn't right. And now, those words echoed louder than ever. Meanwhile, Steffi herself was beginning to sense something was wrong. Her instincts, sharp and maternal, began to tingle every time she caught Luna glancing her way at the office. Something in the way Luna smiled at her, so polished and perfect, felt rehearsed. Calculated. And then there was Finn, more distant lately, more distracted. He was carrying secrets, and Steffi could feel them like weights in the room. She resolved to uncover whatever truth was being hidden, even if it shattered everything she knew. Elsewhere, Hope, still reeling from her own rollercoaster love life, found herself caught between her loyalty to her mother and the strange allure of Thomas, who had been surprisingly supportive through all the chaos. He was quieter now, more reflective, and he spoke often of wanting to be better, not just for Hope, but for their son. She saw the changes in him, but old wounds took time to heal, and her heart still bore scars Ridge and Brooke had unintentionally carved into her childhood. And as for Brooke, the weight of Ridge's engagement hung over her like a storm cloud. She stood alone in the garden that evening, staring out at the sky, replaying every moment they'd shared, every promise he'd made. How could he, she whispered. How could he just move on? Nick joined her, silent at first, until finally he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. Brooke turned, her eyes brimming with pain and confusion. "I loved him for most of my life, Nick. And just like that, he's gone." Nick looked at her, his expression soft but fierce. "Then maybe it's time to stop chasing a man who doesn't know what he wants, and start loving one who does." But love, betrayal, and deception weren't done weaving their tangled web. Baker listened to the tape of Luna's confession on repeat, each playback confirming what he feared. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a plan, a calculated removal of Steffi from the equation. Whether that meant scandal, exile, or something far worse, he couldn't yet tell. But he knew one thing: if he didn't act fast, someone innocent was going to get hurt. At the same time, Taylor basked in her engagement glow, unaware that the ground beneath her was already shaking. Ridge, though seemingly content, kept glancing at his phone, perhaps waiting for a message that would never come. A message from Brooke. A sign. A last-minute declaration that might once again change everything. But Brooke wasn't reaching out. She was retreating, re-evaluating, reawakening. Maybe destiny wasn't a man who kept choosing others. Maybe it was finding strength in her own reflection. And maybe, just maybe, the next chapter wouldn't be written with Ridge at all. As the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and gold, lives were shifting. Some toward light, others into shadows. Alliances were crumbling. Secrets were surfacing. And somewhere, silently and invisibly, the next storm was already beginning to form.